Okay, so these are some questions that you're going to want to think about when putting together your crop plan. If you want to write it down, that's great. If you want to just kind of think about it as you're putting it together, that's great too. But what do you like to eat and grow? That's the most important thing for having a garden that's fun, is one that you like to eat everything that you're growing. You know, I've known people who, you know, don't necessarily like all the produce items that they grow, they just think they're supposed to grow it. But if you have, you know, it's really true, but if, you know, if what you like to eat is kohlrabi and cabbage and radishes and, you know, mustard greens or whatever, then that should be your focus. Your garden should be tailor-made for what you want to walk out at 5 o'clock at night and harvest and come in and eat. So write down what it is that you like to grow. Think about how long during the season that you actually want to be working in this garden. Some people find it exhausting come September. So if you don't want to be doing that, then you block off the late season as something that you don't really want to be managing. If you don't want to be working in the garden in April when it might be 65 or it might be 25, then just block that season off. You know, so really tailor your garden to something that when you are working it is really enjoyable for you. And then that's kind of the way you end up with people who aren't frustrated with their garden, which I know a lot of gardeners who are. It can be a really frustrating experience. So think about how much space that you have in your garden. Like I said before, a crop plan could be for a bucket or it could be for 5 acres. But you're going to want to wrap your head around, do you have like just a nice 4x8 spot? Or, you know, do you have, you know, 10-foot square? That's going to make a big difference in what your crop plan looks like. And the reason is, think about, let's say you have a 10-foot square garden. That may be too big for someone to manage on their own. But what you could do is split it off into 2 gardens, where one year, you know, one season, half the garden is just resting under compost and kind of healing itself from the previous year. And then you just kind of work a smaller spot. You know, so the size of the space you're working, just because you have it doesn't mean you have to use it. Let me know if I need to like talk more quietly. So we want to keep babies happy. So once you've written down the items that you want to be growing, now it's time to think about the seasons that they grow in. You know, having a successful garden absolutely depends on growing the right thing at the right time. So to give you an example, you know, we already mentioned you're not really interested in growing tomatoes in either May or October, but you know, there's a window in there that you want. You know, in the same way, you're not really interested in growing head lettuce in July, because head lettuce in July turns into a giant flower long before you eat it. So you want to make sure you're growing the right thing at the optimal time that it belongs in the soil. So when you think about the items that you've written down, you know, you can just go through and, you know, jot down an E for early, M for middle, L for late next to each one of these items. And then you'll know when that item will be going in the ground. So thinking about your growing space with regard to what you're growing and when. And if I'm going too quickly, please just tell me to slow down. I have a lot of fun talking about this, and sometimes I talk fast. So, please.
So that I've never done even the transplant thing. So how long does it take? You're talking about if you start from seed, grow it inside. Is that what you mean?
Not necessarily everything. I just want to make sure I say this clearly. You know, during the warm weather, you know, when the temperature outside isn't getting below 50s at night, you don't necessarily have to start anything inside. You know, starting stuff inside is something you do when the weather outside is no good. So let's say you wanted to have a tomato going into the ground in, say, mid-June or early June. So work backwards 6 weeks and start your tomato seed in your house as a seed, so that when it comes to, you know, early June, you're putting a plant out this big instead of starting it in early June. That's the whole idea. The whole idea behind growing a transplant is just beating the weather. And so, you know, you think about when that plant wants, you know, when you want that plant to be in the ground, and then just kind of work backwards a little bit. You know, for putting out a transplant, you usually don't need more than, you know, 3 or 4 weeks. Please.
Would it be too early to start plants, or to start seeds now for transplanting once the ground thaws?
Okay, so going from my own experience, the only plants I started before March were 2 different kinds of onions. You know, like those big Walla Walla onions, those things take like 180 days to get a full bulb. So I would start those at the end of February, but that was the only thing. Most plants that you're growing, and it always says on the seed catalog how long it takes from the time the seed goes into the ground to the time you're eating it. You know, most plants are in the 50-60 day range. You know, if they're not, look for other varieties, because usually there's a variety that is, you know, so you're not kind of waiting around forever with these things. Please.
Could I just, this is just a resource that I learned about on a radio show this morning. Johnny Seeds has a program that will figure this all out for you.
So Johnny Seeds, I have a list of suppliers on my last slide, and Johnny's is a group that I've worked with. They're fantastic. Their website's fantastic. Their information is great. So yeah, that's a great point.
What was the name?
With Johnny Seeds.
We've
They have a program on their website.
That, the name of
Oh, there's probably just a button on the website.
Button on the website, and it'll.
And you pick the frost date, the last frost date for the area, and it calculates back for this whole list of seeds.
Okay.
So if you were to go on to Johnny's website and just type in crop planning, I bet it would pop up.
Okay.
Please.
I have been the harvest coordinator for Cheney Mansion
Okay.
for like 3 or 4 years, and we've tried to grow broccoli there. And what happens, the conservatory gives us leftover plants from the plant sale.
Okay.
But the broccolis are real small.
Okay.
So they never mature. And all I get are these teeny tiny little heads.
And now, when do you put them in the ground?
After the first week of May, sometimes later.
And do you know, is there any nutritional deficiencies in the soil or anything?
I don't think so. We've amended the soil with packaged compost. I mean, the conservatory does because it's Park District. But we still don't get.
How about sunlight? Does it
Get
direct?
Yeah, it gets a lot of direct sunlight. And so this year I think Krista's going to start growing the broccoli earlier. And I just the other day I put out my little pots on my windowsill, you know, so that, and I got to find some broccoli to put and try some broccoli in there.
My one worry, I guess, would be just from what you said is if they're giving you these plants away, I don't know if maybe they've been in the cells for too long. Like if they're like real root bound, or is there anything here?
No. They're. I mean, these are things that we sell at the plant sale.
Yeah.
So they're good plants, and I've heard from other people that they have a hard time growing broccoli because it needs such a long growing season.
It does.
It needs to be in the ground first.
So broccoli, you do have early season varieties that are 48 to 52 days, if you could find those, but some of them could be in the 60, 70 day range, and I used to stay away from those.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so it is okay to start them this early, because I'm going to try and get some in
Yeah,
next week.
you may have to pot them up once.
Oh,
but,
yeah. Well, I decided I'm just going to start with a little bigger pot.
Yeah, I think that would work.
Yeah.
Okay, so thinking about your growing space for your crop plan, how much space do you have? How easily can you subdivide it? And what kind of sunlight hits your different spots in the garden? Being Oak Park River Forest, we have a lot of mature trees. A lot of people have told me, that they have an issue with growing different items in their garden because their sunlight may not be full, or you may get morning sunlight and no afternoon. Everybody's garden has different difficulties that, everyone will have to think about. A garden that, is partial sun or, very little sun, you can still grow greens really well, but your peppers won't do well. It's kind of another situation where you're trying to grow the right thing in the right space. Okay, so I'm definitely not an advocate of the square foot gardener, but what I do like about it is that they subdivide their garden plot. And you can do that in any number of ways. It doesn't have to look like a square, it just has to look like you're breaking your garden up into sections. And the whole idea of breaking your garden up into sections is that you can identify where things were in the previous year or the previous season so that you can kind of move those items around your garden. So in this case, these folks here probably have, like a 3x6 garden plot. They've decided to put it into squares. In this first square here, maybe, they'll have, the early season, items, save this for their mid-season items, save this for their late season items. And then they'll kind of rotate the whole section. Everyone does crop planting and rotation differently, but a key aspect is subdividing your garden so that you have sections. And I'll explain why as we kind of go through it. But when you're kind of thinking about your crop plan, draw a very rough sketch of what your garden looks like. And subdivide it into as many sections as you would like. Each one of those sections is going to be its own growing space. And then after you do that, you'll make 2 copies. You'll label each one of the copies early, middle, and late. So you'll have 3 identical drawings of your own garden space showing all the different sections. So you'll take the early sheet and, in kind of a side comment, list out your early crops and just kind of have them on a list on the side. You don't have to put them into places yet, but here you'll have your early sheet and your list of early crops all in the same spot. You'll go ahead and do the same thing with your middle and late sheets.